Uno, dos. Uno, dos, uno, dos. Ya estoy en vivo. Ok. No me escuchan tampoco, ¿verdad? Ok. Uno, dos, uno, dos. Uno, dos, uno, dos. Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Con la fuerza del Espíritu, América, testigos de Cristo vivo.
So let's ask for this afternoon Mother Mary Mother Mary to come with me.
Bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres, y bendito es el fruto del vientre de Jesús. Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros pecadores, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amén. Continuamos con nuestro trabajo.
So let's continue with the afternoon work. The ones who are following us through Facebook and YouTube, we would like to remind you that in this international symposium that we are having here in Montreal, so we heard basically today all the testimonies of Father Ali and his experience here in Canada with indigenous peoples and also brothers from the Caribbean, Monsignor de la County, who sent a communication through Father Esteban, and he shared that experience with all of us. And at the beginning, we have the biblical approximation on the church and the Holy Spirit and the missionary opening and all the apostles, as Father William said, acts of apostles. So now we will continue and go to the forum space. Today, the topic will be pastors, evangelizers with the Spirit into the service of the church and new borders of the universal church. So we will ask him to come with us and illuminate us in this journey. So Father Estelado Raquetti from Brazil. So let's applaud him.
Ese negocio funciona, sí. Usted está ansioso a hacer uma conferência em português, mas não, eu vou tentar.
I'm going to try to speak Spanish for most of you. So, the objective that we have here is to introduce the works that we have to do by groups, and the topic that we have to discuss is pastors, evangelizers with the Spirit at the service of the new confines of the universal church. This is a very long and complicated topic. Therefore, I try to interpret this topic in the following manner. In three moments where we have pastors, evangelizers with the Spirit at the service of the new confines of the universal church. Three moments. But because the Spirit was already discussed this morning, so maybe I will just leave it aside. And let's talk now about pastors, evangelizers, and then church within the concilios is to the at the service of the new confines of universal church. And here we have to ask ourselves two questions in order to prepare ourselves for the group work. So, pastors, evangelators with the Spirit is inspired in chapter 5 but it speaks about evangelizers with the Spirit. So, pastors, evangelizers, well, maybe there is a problem with the interpretation of this, and I believe it's like saying disciples, missionaries, so the two faces of the same coin. So it is the essence of Christians' life for all the baptized, not only for the ministries, but means to be church in the double dimension, in the exercise of maternality, to be close, to take care of people, pastorality, and also the gift to go out there to walk and to always try to go beyond Evangelii Gaudium 21. So now the work of the shepherd takes place between the road and the pastures. So the church pastor is called in the first place to be a sheepfold, a walking house, a dwelling place for brother peoples, and a home for the poor, a house with open doors to enter and to leave, a house and a school of communion, and therefore of participation and synodality, because there is no communion without participation. Secondly, pastoral action takes place on the path of discipleship, following, learning, and imitating the one shepherd. Missionary disciples are called to take on the smell of the sheep, walking along them at the front to point the way, as Francis said. And the objective of pastoral action is to feed, nourish, and to seek pastures, abandoning the comfortable criterion of it's always been done this way, listening and discerning what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Pentecost already took place, It came every day. So we are the ones that now that need to take out the spirit. Promoting co-responsibility and effective participation by all the faithful in order to meet the demands of today's world with creativity and boldness, starting from the continual rediscovery of the most essential core of the gospel. So we need to establish the difference between the deposit of the faith. Faith deposit is like the core. All pastoral work, all the organization, all service to the people of God, all accompaniment of the baptized, so that they become ever more missionary disciples, are aimed solely and exclusively at evangelizing the world. Pastoral work has no purpose in itself other than to equip a classical body to be missionary. The Lord only command, the only one, to his disciples is to make disciples of all nations. This is the essence of church. She was born from evangelization only to evangelize, starting by evangelizing themselves. So, this consideration is important to understand that between pastors and evangelizers, there must always be a close relationship and a centrifugal tension. The church is not an end in itself. We cannot restrict ecclesial action to the space of the sheepfold because the church's vocation is primarily to always be at the service of the kingdom in the field of the world. In this sense, ministeriality, that is, the service of the church, must be understood much more from the point of view of the sower and the fisherman than from the point of view of the pastor. In particular, the ordained ministry needs to be understood much more within the category of the apostle than the pastor, because here lies the root from which the various charisms and the multiplicity of ministries unfold. The mission invites us today to be imaginative and creative, putting pastoral work at the service of the mission and not vice versa, and also to rediscover apostolicity of ecclesial identity is an invitation to all baptized men and women to be much more than they think they should be, an invitation to move forward, to energize, to recreate, to look far, to get out of self referentiality. And 30 years have passed since Santo Domingo, when for the first time it was affirmed that the new evangelization requires a pastoral conversion of the church that concerns everything and everyone. 16 years have passed since Aparecida, which reiterated that no community should exempt itself from entering decisively into the constant processes of missionary renewal and abandoning the outdated structures that no longer favor the transmission of the faith. So 10 years have passed since Evangelii Gaudium, in which Pope dreamed of a missionary option capable of transforming everything so that customs, styles, schedules, language, and the whole ecclesial structure become a channel more suited to evangelization of today's world than to self preservation. How are our churches doing this pastoral conversion? What progress has been made and what challenges remain to be faced? So here we have the first question. So let's not be pessimistic. We have done things. Of course, we need also to mention all the challenges. How are our churches in this deep pastoral conversion? What progresses have been made and what challenges remain to be faced? Now, the Spirit. Today, we spoke about the Spirit in the morning, so maybe to say that, what Father William said at the end of his presentation, it's a community that was not ready to announce the gospel to all, only to the Jews. So Pentecostes, Peter speaks only uh, to Judeus. And it was a difficult path to understand what he had suffered. So it was not possible. So the apostolic community was an intercultural wall that was a little bit of a failure. So Karaner said that today we are living a new time which is similar to the one of the transition from Jewish Christianism to the other Christianism. So the Second Vatican Concilius inaugurated a transition and a church, an Occidental church, for a world church. So that means a migration of the gospel from European culture to other cultures, resulting in a faith that is lived, understood, and celebrated, and in a multiplicity of expressions and worldviews. And this will lead to a reformulation of the content of faith from the fundamental core of revelation. So in South America, we are working, for example, in the Amazon rituals, and this was something asked by the Synod for the Amazon area. So they propose their own rituals. I don't know if we are going to be able to have some success, but we are working on that. So this, well, that means that the Roman ritual is not speaking. So it's a failure in the Amazon area, and I understand. Well, Samuel Ruiz was speaking in Medellin in the 60s that if we do not face the problem with indigenous peoples, we will continue having the same problem. So we are facing now the methodological failure of the evangelization of the continent. So this was very hard words. So this is pretty serious to really face this passage from a Western church to a world church as it was at the beginning, the Jewish Christianism towards the Greek one. So this is our reflection. So let's go to the second part. We are talking about the new confines, at the service of the new confines of the universal church. The power of life of the Spirit impels the church to go out to the ends of the earth and to launch out with boldness and confidence, parousia, on the mission of the whole church. That means today go to the ends of the earth and to be at the service of the new ends of the universal church. So, what are they and where are they? So, to answer these questions, I'm going to break down the term confines into three different meanings: confines as horizons, confines as borders, and confines as margins. In the first place, the word confines points to the horizons of a movement of evolution, of expansion, of advancement, of discovery. The church is at the service of a humanity on its journey ever further, sharing, going beyond the borders, sharing with it the joys and the hopes and also the sorrows and anxieties, especially of the poor. Where is the world moving today? Towards what end? Towards what goal? Towards what horizon? The world, the globalized world in which we live, seems to be to lose the horizon and lowering its expectations, shrinking its dreams and hopes, and living on fragmentary short-term goals. History says the Pope shows signs of regression.
Sin embargo,
However, for missionary disciples, nothing human can seem strange to them. Francis continually invites the church to overcome the temptation to close itself off, to shrink back, to condemn, and to deal reactively with the complex problems that arise in today's world. On the contrary, it is necessary to go out, to create proactive habits, to see opportunities and not just threats, to discern with certainty, but to walk in hope and to be open to the great ideals that make life more beautiful and more dignified. That's Fratelli Tutti 55. The universal horizons of culture, societies, knowledge, science, technology, and the various areas of life are a continual invitation to be open to everything and to everyone, to the new, to the unexpected, to the unknown, to the subversive. Remembering the adage of Saint Irenaeus, what is not taken on is not redeemed. And also remembering that the good news of Jesus of Nazareth was also something absolutely disconcerting. It was new, it was open to everything and to everyone. And it sowed hope, but it also generated resistance and conflict. There's also this reflection of the on the this general assembly that was held in Mexico, the ecclesial assembly. The first chapter, it has a list about the socioeconomic field, the major difficulties, the socio-political areas, the different conflicts in our countries, the socio-cultural area in our cities, in our urban areas, among our youth, the ecological domain as well, and the various players involved: young people, families, women, indigenous people, Afro descendants. These challenges, these are all confines that we need to keep in mind when we take a global perspective of the confines of the universal church. A second meaning of the term confines refers to borders, so the threshold between our world and the world of others. The confines or the ends of the earth are also lines of demarcation, of separation, of crossings and exchange. The origins of today's world's borders, whether they're geopolitical, sociocultural, or identity based, can be traced back to a historical, cultural, or ancestral issue. And more to the process of colonization and domination by the West over the rest of the planet. And we can recall that from the testimony we heard this morning. In fact, the hegemony of the West created the border that is the mother of all borders, the abysmal line between modernity and coloniality. These frontiers, with their subsystems of visible and invisible distinctions, reproduce themselves naturally and in an articulated way to this day in all aspects of daily life and in the organization of societies, in international relations, and even in churches. With its universal hegemonic salvationist pretensions, the West systematically imposed an asymmetrical relationship between a superior being, white, Christian, civilized, and benefactor type of person, and an inferior under being Indian, black, pagan, underdeveloped, needy. A world system arose from the domination of souls, the imposition of an imaginary, the seduction of minds, the eradication of cultural identities, and the hierarchization of races, the negation of others. These processes of domination still define us today and are internalized and naturalized within us so that they constitute an identity frontier originating from the inspiring complicity of the Christian mission. Mission and colonization, they go hand in hand, and we always have to remember that. This mission, we're talking about the modern mission here, not Jesus Christ's mission, the modern mission. This mission needs to return to penitentially inhabit the frontiers that it itself created ad gentis, in order to learn, to unlearn a way of addressing others contra gentis, and relearn again in reciprocity with others inter gentis. So based on ad gentis and contra gentis, in order to learn inter gentis. This is a profound inner conversion. Our churches need to go to the frontiers of their knowledge, of their understanding, of their certainties, their way of being, and seek new ways of evangelizing themselves and others, truly encountering others. Pope Francis says every time we meet a human being in love, we are able to discover something new about God. In this sense, the mission needs to think again and do theology again. So mission theology is called upon to take up its dual role of frontier theology and frontier of theology. It is worth remembering that the colonial approach to the mission was not determined by the methods, inconsistencies, and attitudes of the missionaries. On the contrary, it was determined by the deductive relationship between theology and mission. The mission applied to theology without the mission being able to question this. The new confines, understood as frontiers, constitute for the church today front lines where it can see reality from the reverse side of history, from the colonial, cultural, religious, and epistemic wounds of people who have been crucified, impoverished, silenced, discarded, and abandoned. Borders, therefore, can constitute both a historical reality and an ethical option, which in turn implies an optic, a fundamental detachment in terms of perceiving, listening to, and questioning reality from the point of view of victims and survivors. A third meaning of the term confines, a third interpretation, in a certain way similar to the second, points towards the margins, the peripheries, the places that are far away, marginal, suburban, bordering. They are the Galilee of today's world. Mixed race, syncretic, impoverished territories marked by exclusion, expropriation, violence, and abandonment. Francis continually invites the church to go out to the peripheries so as not to run around the world without direction or meaning. The difference between borders are unlike borders. Existential peripheries are not between worlds, but within worlds, as forgotten, invisible, despised realities. If the border represents the place of encounter or disencounter with the other, the periphery is the place of proximity to the poor. Becoming poor is a radical requirement for following Jesus because this condition is participation in divine life. It shows who God is, whom God prefers, where God is situated in his mission. The encounter with Jesus Christ through the poor is a constitutive dimension of our faith. And this is in document 257 of Parasita. To them, of course, they have a status of mediator of grace, and this is under 197. So it is not enough for the church to claim to be the home of the poor and the marginalized. It must first enter their homes, the homes of the poor, as a pilgrim. This also implies a learning process that leads to inhabiting the peripheries, weaving bonds of friendship, feeling from the ground, from the earth of the marginalized, to connect heart to heart with the poor, share their worldview, live their daily lives intensely. Today, the testimony from our brother that we heard, Ali, this morning, spoke to us about this. Inhabiting is much more than becoming a guest. It's about letting the periphery dwell within us. It means belonging by immersing yourself, touching with your hand the disenchantment, the divisions, conflicts, and lacerations produced by the border diaspora, rooted in the history, body, and daily life of violated women, of indigenous and black people, of dispossessed migrants, workers condemned to precariousness, those excluded for gender reasons, for the millions of dispossessed people who live colonial violence firsthand. For this reason, the peripheries, like the frontiers, are not an easy place to live. All the universality of the mission extended to all nations to the ends of the earth will end up being contextualized in a territory, which is not just any territory, and in a marginal, forgotten, excluded existential condition, which is not just any existential condition. Not everything can be mission. When everything is mission, mission suddenly means nothing. Mission means assuming, sharing, and living this existential condition of exclusion and invisibility. Mission, it means ceasing to be the center. Mission is disappearing. The disciple missionary is de-centered, says Pope Francis, because his center is Jesus Christ, who summons and sends. This center demands fidelity, divestment, disarmament, and the most absolute gratuitousness. Here is where we must meet with Jesus Christ at the middle of the road, at the halfway point of Mass, as we say in Portuguese. If Jesus Christ, the idea is to live for Him, like He, to offer life as He offered His life to us. It is about taking on Jesus Christ, and taking Him on means taking on His purpose, which is to give your life for others. So, document 360, what is mission? Mission is to give your life to others, definitively. So, we are called upon to be another Jesus Christ. It's a little bit like that. Anyways, in conclusion, the new confines of the universal church point to new paths of conversion. It is an invitation to the church to always seek the dynamic of exodus and gift giving, of going out of oneself, of journeying and always sowing anew, always going beyond. The confines, in terms of horizons, frontiers, and peripheries, are points of arrival, of dwelling, and of departure for the mission, since Jesus sends his disciples out from a mountain in Galilee, a mountain in the periphery. Missionary projects always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Not even Jesus wanted to delay his mission any longer than he had to. Mission always involves setting out and starting again. In John chapter 16, it says, okay, I'm going to head out. I'm going to go to the heavens, because that way he could continue to live. So Jesus also finished his mission. The temptation is always to continue with the mission forever. The missionary church constantly lives in this condition of continual exile. It inhabits this world as a pilgrim, but it is not of this world. Its journey points to a homeland that is beyond the confines, a definitive homeland. The church can never stop walking. The day it stops, it settles down and establishes itself, taking root as a citizen of some world, it becomes the center. And missionary disciples have no roots. They have feet to walk and to pursue the kingdom of life, which is the fundamental content of their mission, the offer of a full life for all. So that is part of the process of inhabiting the confines, the frontiers, the peripheries, not as guests, but as pilgrims. Taking up a metaphor from Galilee II, 1983. It's a wonderful thing said about the mission. We could associate the missionary journey of the church in America, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, with the image of three exoduses. The first exodus, the church of the continent went out from its temples to meet the poor in the peripheries. And the option for the poor, Medellin, Puebla. In the second exodus, it went out from its borders to meet the others, the indigenous and the Afro descendants, Santo Domingo. A third exodus is under the perspective as the Ad Gentes challenge to the ends of the earth, going out to meet the poor and the others in other continents, inhabiting their homes, their squares, their peripheries, their borders. The world expects from our Latin America and Caribbean church a more significant commitment to the universal mission on all continents. Will the questions are, will the Spirit give us the grace to be so bold? The confines, the frontiers, the peripheries of the universal church are not just territories or goals, but first and foremost, paths of openness, conversion, and going forth. What new paths is the Spirit pointing out to our local churches? At what new paths could we propose for our local churches at the service of what peripheries? What new paths could we propose for the celebration of Cam 6? What new paths could we propose from the celebration of Cam 6? So that's a question that I leave with you. I think you could talk a lot about this. As we say in Portuguese, do so in the groups. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Padre.
Amen. Thank you very much, Father, for your presentation. Anyone wishes to make a comment or to ask a questions? We have a couple of minutes. So I have Father Ricardo who wishes to take the floor. Thank you, Father Esteban, because you always give us new lights. You have affirmed something like the mission has its territory, which is the existential condition. As we well know, as we know, there has been a discussion regarding different missions that are related to a territorial vision. I think, in fact, in this evangelization, we talk about territorial missions, although the Father Orlando said that the change of regulations, we are talking about first announcement and not territories anymore, because mission related to the territorial aspect is one of the characteristics of doing the things. No, it's a colonialist way of doing it. So you are talking about territories as existential things, and we talk about big peripheries. So what do you think in the middle of this symposium, or which do you think should be the priorities of those existential peripheries that the church in Latin America should take as a priority? So that's a question of $1 million. First of all, the territory aspect. We are no longer in a Christianity world. The territories of missions or lands of missions used to be colonial lands outside Europe. So, lands of mission. But, for example, in the theology of the mission, we work with continuity and discontinuity with the traditional theology of missions. So, I believe that one of the elements of continuity is to keep this aspect of geographical, but in brackets. In this sense, you have territories, you have conditions, you have people that talk about territories, and where you are called, well, for the mission is urgent and you have a priority. We cannot mix the mission with all the things you can do in church. So we have to go to the extremes. Also, movement. We have to go and we don't have to wait for the others to come to us. For example, we talk, well, we have to go to see the ones who are far. But who is far away from who? In our language, we have a lot of self reference and we are self centered. So we need to change our mentality, and it has to be clear that, for example, every local church has to see in its territory what are the confines, what are the peripheries. After they have to see beyond how to work with the other churches in a missionary cooperation. And then here we have local church and the confines. So to see it as a missionary cooperation between churches. So the missionary lives here from Quebec to cooperate with the other church that is in the Amazon, but the protagonist is the church in the Amazon. It's a small, it's very poor, but that's the one. That is the church, is a church. Doesn't need anything else. Local church is a church, even if it's a poor church. So we have that territory that is the periphery, and beyond the borders, we also need to see the horizons of humanity as a territory or as areas for a mission. We could speak about physical and geographical territories. We have situations, existential territories. We also need to have a special look towards the people that are alone, old age people. Those are existential peripheries that we have to see. So every local church needs to study their own reality and their capacity also to collaborate with other churches. We have a last comment from Father Jaffe. Thank you, Father. Your presentations are always a driver that takes us beyond. But I don't want to make the mistake of having a conceptual analysis, but sometimes it seems that the panorama is like too wide. When everything is mission, nothing is mission. So the ecclesial language somehow has mentioned a lot of expressions. So we have mission, we have evangelization, we have evangelizing mission, action, missionary action, evangelizing mission, and I even heard that the task of the mission is to evangelize, and we are there in the middle of all the terms. On the other hand, we have the temptation of the social action that, well, you know, the synod that was from 1971. It said that it had a component of the mission. Sometimes it's only the term and social action and the mission as a such. But here, having this wide image, how can we place ourselves in in the current times? But you know, we need another conference to answer that. So you have different ways to place things in a table. So one was the Redentoris Missio, and Puebla started with a missionary panorama to then organize a theology of evangelization in chapter 2 that was good, and that finishes with that. Well, and finally, the time arrived for Latin America, etc. So more or less, we can do the following. When we talk about missionary pastoral, the person is the Christian who is a militant. Our community, our people who come to mass, so they don't need to be converted, right? So missionary pastoral, the new evangelization or evangelizing action is the action of church in secular society, because there is no pastoral. So you have to sow. So you will go there, you will plant, and you just let God do its work. And then we have the missions that are in the territories culturally non-Christian. Culturally non-Christian, which is influenced by other cultural traditions, religious traditions. So we have the Asian continent, for example, and then also we have, the, we have missions to people in order to include all non-Christians or post-Christians in the case of Europe and so on. So the debate is open. So I believe that the mission is a concept that is wider than evangelization. Technically speaking, evangelization is to open your mouth, is to announce explicitly, we have to do this. Yes, we have to do. But it's not only that. It's also dialogue, it's also service, and also testimony, silent testimonies. So the mission is a concept. In Evangelii Annuntiandi, we had all the discussion regarding the colonial aspect of the mission. So if you have a mission here, you put it there. And we adopted the term evangelization. And in the 80s, we took back the word mission, understanding that it's a word that is more inclusive. Now we are living in a complicated and complex reality. Nothing more normal to define the mission because it has a lot of complexities. So I think that first, a mission, as the Vatican II says, it's a church. It's the nature of God. It's nature of God for us. It's not a task. It's not an activity. It's a way of being. And this way of being well, has no confines. It goes to the ends of the earth, not only in a wide aspect, but also in depth. Evangelization is done in depth. Evangelii Annunciandi 18, 19, the values of culture, etc. And then in extension for all the peoples. So the mission is for all until the ends of the earth, and geographically and historically, without end. So I have a wider article that I wrote about what I mentioned here. So if you want it, I have it here. So you have here the questions you will be discussing, and this is what Father Esteban shared. How are our churches and what are the progresses that we still need to overcome? The new paths of the Spirit of local churches, to the service of which peripheries, new paths that we can propose from celebration of our CAM 6. The time we have is up to 5, 4 to 4:30. We have a break, and if you need more time, you can use that break time to work. But at 4:30, we need to be officially here to get together for the discussion with the brothers that we have appointed to have a dialogue among all the ones that are here. So I wish you a lot of success and work in joy. Thank you.
Conseguimos nos comunicar.